Friday again. I'm always excited to come before you and bring you newer and fresher reviews from the book that we are studying together. I know today's going to be a fun-filled day. So stay tuned as we talk about habit 4. But before we, get started, let's do a little bit of recap from, where we came from. Habit 1, 2, and 3. So we had established that habit 1, 2, and 3 are in the sector of private victory. Being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first. These 3 habits actually talks about personal self-development and self-management. So we had already, discussed those habits extensively. And for those of us who have been faithful enough to, commence practice of these 3 habits, I know that by now we should record at least a little bit of positive results because, it is still a short time to draw conclusion as to how well that we are doing. The next set of habits we'll be dealing with, that's the habit 4, 5, 6, and then the 7, has to do with interpersonal relations. So that's one we refer to as public victory. The first 3 were for private victory, we, ourselves, and then this other 3 has to do with we versus people. So we're going to talk about a few paradigms that has to do with interpersonal relationship and interpersonal skill, because we know that for good leaders, they have to have a high level of interpersonal skill. It is very important in relations with other people for you to have or develop if you don't have people skill. I would also like to let us know that you don't have to wait until you're perfect with your private victory, like you 100% privately, before you can commence the practice of the public victory. Both sectors can run concurrently. So I can work on myself, trying to self-manage, and then also work on my relationships with other people, how I can effectively manage them. I mean, one doesn't have to wait for the other, before it can commence. That's the point. So we can have 2 of them running together. Yes. So as usual, I always have to read from the book so that we can, be on the same page as we ride. The opening quote says, "There can be no friendship without confidence, and no confidence without integrity." Remember that we're talking about interpersonal, so public victory. So before moving into the area of public victory, we should remember that effective interdependence can only be built on a foundation of true independence. Private victory precedes public victory. Algebra comes before calculus. As we look back and survey the terrain to determine where we've been and where we are in relationship to where we are going, we clearly see that we could not have gotten where we are without coming the way we came. There aren't any other roads, there aren't any shortcuts. There's no way to parachute into the terrain. The landscape ahead is covered with the fragments of broken relationship of people who have tried. They've tried to jump into effective relationships without the maturity and the strength of character to maintain them. It takes a lot to maintain interpersonal relationship with other people. I mean, for one, it takes patience to deal with people. It takes emotional intelligence. It takes a lot of things. And if I haven't conquered myself, there's no way. Or if I'm not working on conquering myself seriously, there's no way I can conquer other people. So the writer gave us a quote here in the book that says, "You can't have the fruits without the root." And I think that is very true. I mean, before you can see the fruit of a tree, it means there's a root somewhere. Like we stated earlier from the book where we read, it said that algebra comes before calculus. So the algebra here is the private victory, and then the calculus is the public victory. I'd like to read you something again from the book. It says, "Some people say that you have to like yourself before you can like others. I think the idea has merit, but if you don't know yourself, if you don't control yourself, if you don't have mastery over yourself, it is very hard to like yourself, except in some short-term psych-up superficial way." So psych-up superficial means this, whatever it is you're portraying that you are, doesn't have any depth. So you are just for the sake of the people, and to put up a show, to put up an act. You're behaving as if you have learned how to manage yourself. Man, if situations that serious situations arise, the real you is going to come out. So it's important that you take time out to work on yourself. That's the only way you can be effective in working with other people or on other people too. So it says that real self-respect comes from dominion over self, from true independence. And that's the focus of habits 1, 2, and 3. Independence is an achievement. Oh, it's a great achievement. Trust me, it is. Interdependence is a choice only independent people can make. If you're not independent, please don't try to become interdependent. You would crash, I tell you seriously. Unless you are willing to achieve real independence, it's foolish to try to develop human relation skills. We might try, we might even have some degree of success when the sun is shining, but when the difficult times come, and they will, we won't have the foundation to keep things together. We will go crazy, like crazy. You will just see yourself exploding with anger. Do you understand me? So self-management is important. So it says the most important ingredient we put into any relationship is not what we say or what we do, but what we are. And if our words and our actions come from superficial human relation techniques rather than from our own inner core, others will sense that duplicity. We simply won't be able to create and sustain the foundation necessary for effective interdependence. You cannot fake it. You cannot fake it. You cannot fake it. The techniques and skills that really make a difference in human interaction are the ones that almost naturally flow from a truly independent character. So the place to begin building any relationship is inside ourselves, inside our circle of influence, our own character. As we become independent, proactive, centered in correct principles, value-driven, and able to organize and execute around the priorities in our lives with integrity, we then can choose to become interdependent, capable of building rich, enduring, highly productive relationships with other people. So if we don't begin with ourselves to try to conquer ourselves, to have the integrity, to know how to prioritize, to put first things first, to begin with the end in mind, we cannot have a smooth relationship with other people. So we have to do like a self-conquer first, before we can conquer other people. Interdependence, right, opens up worlds of possibilities for deep, rich, meaningful associations, increased productivity, like the list is endless. When you can relate with other people, there's the achievements you can have, like the things you can achieve are limitless. I always think, I have this, example in my head. You see a matured lady, very mature, she has she's capable of, bringing forth a newborn. And then you see a man who also is capable of bringing forth a child. But they cannot do that independently. They have to come together to synergize, to be able to agree and make a baby. So independently, I'm a lady, I'm a man, but independently, I can be a mom, I can be a dad. So that's the point I'm trying to make. So we have to come together to be able to achieve a baby. Yes, so that is what interdependence can do. It can the achievements we can have, oh my God, oh my, unthinkable things we can achieve, unthinkable things. The author talks about something he calls the emotional bank account. I'm just going to go ahead and, read what he says it is. We all know what a financial bank account is. What makes deposit, we make deposits into it and build up a reserve from which we can make withdrawals when we need to. An emotional bank account is a metaphor that describes the amount of trust that's being built up in a relationship. It's the feeling of safeness you have with another human being. If I make deposit into an emotional bank account with you through courtesy, kindness, honesty, and keeping my commitments to you, I build up a reserve. Your trust towards me become higher, and I can call upon that trust many times if I need to. I can make mistakes, and that trust level, that emotional reserve, will compensate for it. My communication may not be clear, but you will get my meaning anyway. You won't make me an offender for a word. When the trust account is high, communication is easy, instant, and effective. So we have to try to make deposits into people, like by showing them, random acts of kindness, by, courtesies, by respecting them, by valuing them, by hearing them. There's a lot of ways that we can deposit into people's emotional bank account. And trust me, your heart of hearts, the deepest part of your heart, already knows how to win another person. You just have to engage that ability, and you will fly high in your interpersonal skill. So he said, every relationship requires constant deposits. You may have the wisdom and the knowledge to help people, but because your emotional bank account with them is on a red balance, they will not open up to you. So just like we talked about the regular, bank account with the bank, where you have your money in, if you're on the red, you cannot withdraw. If you are on the red and you don't make deposit, the bank cannot even give you a loan. You have to have credibility and all of those things. So you have to go through a lot of deposits to be able to stand the test of time when you make withdrawals, because those time of withdrawals will definitely come. I mean, we're human beings, we're not perfect always. Not perfect. So it said, the golden rule says to do unto others as you would have others do unto you. While on the surface, that could mean to do for them what you would like to have done for you. I think the more essential meaning is to understand them deeply as individuals, the way you would want to be understood, and then to treat them in terms of that understanding. As one successful parent said about raising children, treat them all the same by treating them differently. Wow. So if I say I love people equally, I have to love them differently depending on the kind of person that they are, or kind of people that they are. You get? So what may mean a lot to another person may not mean anything to the other person. I wrote something here. So I said, little and random acts of kindness, of genuine kindness and courtesies are so important. In relationships, the little things are the big things. People never forget. People never actually forget. People are very tender, very sensitive inside. I don't believe age or experience makes much difference. Inside, even within the most toughened and calloused exteriors, are the tender feelings and emotions of the heart. So have you ever seen someone, an adult, to say, the day you melted my heart was the day, my pen fell and, quickly helped me to pick it up. That was something you would have, done unthoughtfully. Like you didn't think about it and you just did it. But you registered something in someone's heart. So genuine acts of kindness are major deposits in the hearts of people. Keeping a commitment or a promise is a major deposit. Breaking one is a major withdrawal. In fact, there's probably not a more massive withdrawal than to make a promise that's important to someone and then not to come through. The next time a promise is made, they won't believe it. People tend to build their hopes around promises, particularly promises about their basic livelihood. You don't want to break promises you make to people, whether they are adults or they are kids, because at the end of the day, everybody has a heart. Everybody, is emotional, no matter how hard they are. We already read that. Everybody has a tender part that wants you to keep to the promises that you make to them, and that also, has to do with you having integrity as a person. That's the only way that people can have confidence in you. I believe that if you cultivate the habit of always keeping the promises you make, you will build bridges of trust that span the gaps of understanding between you and your child. This is for parents now. Then when your child wants to do something you don't want him to do, and out of your maturity you can see consequences that the child cannot see, you can say, son, If you do this, I promise you that this will be the result. If that child has cultivated trust in your word, in your promises, he will act on your counsel. So you see why keeping promises are important, because it will make the other person trust you real good. There's another part of issue with dealing with people is expectations. There's a saying that expectation precedes disappointment. But when we clarify expectations, it sort of allows everybody to already know what to expect. So he said, unclear expectations in the area of goals also undermine communication trust. The cause of almost all relationship difficulties is rooted in conflicting or ambiguous expectations around roles and goals. So we have to specify what our expectations are in any relationship, be it a buyer-seller relationship, employer-employee relationship, parent-child relationship, because it's going to reduce the disappointments that we have to experience. We can be certain that unclear expectations will lead to misunderstanding, disappointment, and withdrawal of trust. See, now we didn't state what our expectations are, and at the end of the day, I had an expectation that I made up in my head, but we didn't talk about it. It becomes a withdrawal of trust when you don't live up to the expectations I made up in my head. Do you understand? So we don't want to make that withdrawal by neglecting the first part of this, which is to state what the expectations of any relationship should be. The deposit is to make the expectations clear and explicit in the beginning. This takes a real investment of time and effort up front, but it saves great amount of time and effort down the road. When expectations are not clear and shared, people begin to become emotionally involved and simple misunderstandings become compounded, turning into personal clashes and communications breakdown. We had said that you have to state the expectations so that disappointments do not arise, which will eventually turn to be withdrawals from the emotional bank accounts that we were trying to build. Clarifying expectations sometimes takes a great deal of courage. It seems easier to act as though differences don't exist and to hope things will work out than it is to face the differences and work together to arrive at a mutually agreeable set of expectations. Sometimes it takes courage. It takes a great amount of courage for you to say to someone, look, I am here with you because of the money, because of this, because of that, because of the skill I'm trying to learn from you. So you don't begin to have other ideas, coming up in your mind. So this person knows why we're here and knows what to expect, so that emotions don't build up and at the end of the day be like, oh, I trusted you and you did this to me, but look, I told you what I was here for, so why are you having expectations? So we know that clarifying expectations is very important for dealing with other people. One of the most important ways to manifest integrity is to be loyal to those who are not present. In doing so, we build the trust of those who are present. When you defend those who are absent, you retain the trust of those present. Have you met people who try to, talk bad about people who they smile with in their presence, and then when the people are not there, they talk bad about them? I mean, those people are littered everywhere in our lives. You don't want to be that kind of a person, because it won't make you effective. So suppose you and I were talking alone and we were criticizing our supervisor in a way that we would not dare to do if he were present. Now, what will happen when you and I have a falling out? I'm going to be discussing your weaknesses with someone else. That's what you and I did behind our supervisor's back. You know my nature. I'll sweet talk you to your face and badmouth you behind your back. You've seen me do it. That's the essence of duplicity. Does that build a reserve of trust in my account with you? No. There's no honor among thieves, we all know. If I'm discussing someone in an evil way with you, I'll discuss you with someone else. So we should be careful the things that we do when people are present or absent, because in the very nearest future, we would need them to trust us, and they may not be able to trust us because of the things that they have seen us do. Apologize sincerely when you make a withdrawal. It is very necessary and will make a great deposit. It takes a great deal of character to apologize quickly from the heart. Some people just do leave, I'm sorry. And people know when you mean an apology. So when you hurt someone, that's a withdrawal. But when you apologize sincerely, it's a -1 + 1, so it balances things out. But the apology has to come from the heart, and people know when you actually apologize from your heart. People with little internal security can't apologize. It makes them too vulnerable. They feel it makes them appear soft and weak, and they fear that others will take advantage of their weakness. Their security is based on the opinions of other people, and they worry about what others might think. In addition, they usually feel justified in what they did. They rationalize their own wrong in the name of the other person's wrong. And if they apologize at all, it is superficial. It is not from the heart. They don't apologize from a state of true repentance. It is just for the sake of it. So they don't say, I didn't apologize to this person, so I have apologized. Can we have peace? You know, they don't do it because they want to do it. They do it because they just want it to be on the record that they apologized. And that's not a deposit at all. It's still a withdrawal. It's a withdrawal after a withdrawal. So now we get into habit 4 proper. Think, win, win. I always like to read the opening quotes because it has something that we can learn from. It said, we have committed the golden rule to memory. Let us commit it to life. So all the things that we've been talking about, it is time to put them to practice. Where there's no practice, there's no evidence of learning. Because the evidence of learning is in the practicing. Because in the practicing, we'll know whether you really learned and what you actually learned. The author opened this chapter by telling us a story about an organization that wanted to award the best staff of the year on a particular project by giving the person a trip to Bermuda. Now, what this did was to breed an unhealthy competition amongst the staff. So everybody wanted to, emerge the winner. So they were not cooperating at all. They were competing and trying to, bring each other down in a bid to emerge the best staff and then go to Bermuda. That is not the think win-win mentality. In the think win-win mentality, or in the think win-win habit, it is how can you and I benefit from what is going on. And competition will not allow us to get there. So there's something he wrote here. He said, whether you are the president of a company or the janitor, the moment you step from independence into interdependence in any capacity, you step into a leadership role. You are in a position of influencing other people, and the habit of effective interpersonal leadership is to think win-win. So when I get to think any way other than win-win, I am breeding something that even I cannot survive, because you don't want to be in an unhealthy competition with anybody. It is draining. It is depressing to be inside of that kind of competition. So as a manager or a supervisor, whatever, we have to be careful the kind of reward systems that we develop for the people working under us, the people that we're supervising, because it's going to go a long way to determine how fast or how well that a particular project can be concluded, and the spirit and the attitude amongst the staff. So he said, but you can't change the fruit without changing the roots. Working on the attitude and behaviors would have been hacking at the leaves. So we focused instead on producing personal and organizational excellence in an entirely different way by developing information and reward systems which reinforce the value of cooperation. So if you don't have a reward system that enforces cooperation, what you will have is very unhealthy competition that no organization can survive. And you don't want that, because you cannot accomplish anything. So it said win-win seeks mutual benefits. The solution here mutually benefits everybody. Here, both parties feel good about the conclusion of the matter. So in think win-win, both parties involved are not selfish about how they go about to solve the problem, because they want everybody involved to come out happy and a winner as well. There are other kinds of paradigms to human interaction. So that's the win-win, the win-lose, the lose-win, the lose-lose, the win-win or no deal. But our habit 4 talks about win-win, but we'll likely touch all this so we can know their differences and know when we're trying to engage them, so that if it's not beneficial to the issue at hand, we do not engage. Win-lose is an authoritarian approach. I get my way, you don't get yours. For win-lose people, they make sure they win. It doesn't care who or what they have to tear down, they make sure they win. For win-lose people are prone to use position, power, credential, possessions, or personality to get their way. The authoritarian people. Lose-win people consider themselves losers and always allow other people to have their way with them every time. I think those people have low self-esteem. Why would you always want to lose for another person to win? There's a better way out of these things, for God's sake. So he said lose-win is worse than win-lose because he has no standards, no demands, no expectation, no vision. People who think lose-win are usually quick to please or appease. They seek strength from popularity or acceptance. They have little courage to express their own feelings and convictions, and are easily intimidated by the ego strength of others. In negotiation, lose-win is seen as capitulation, giving in or giving up. Those people. Sometimes we practice those things unknowingly. In leadership, it is permissiveness or indulgence. Lose-win means being a nice guy, even if the nice guy finishes last. So you see that when you are a lose-win person, you always want to make people happy, to please them, to make sure they are smiling, and you hurt yourself by so doing. Then there's the lose-lose people. This happens when both parties are determined and stubborn. The author gave us a story of a divorce case where the husband was asked to sell everything and divide the property the proceeds in half and give his wife 50% and keep 50%. The man went ahead to sell. Let me look at it here. He said the husband, he sold a car worth $10,000 for $50 and gave his wife $25. The wife protested, and the clerk checked on the situation and discovered that the husband was proceeding in the same manner systematically through all the assets. Are you kidding? So let's lose together. Like, I don't win, you don't win, and I'm determined on this. God. People do exist, I tell you. But for highly effective people, like for people who want to be highly effective, win-win is the best option. That's why it's the title for our habit 4. Win-win is should be the only option. You should only resort to another option when there is nothing you can do. But win-win has always been the best option. So it says here, if you value a relationship and the issue isn't really important, you might want to go for lose-win in some circumstances to genuinely affirm the other person. What I want isn't as important to me as my relationship with you. Let's do it your way this time. You get, like I said, if you think that you cannot go any other way, that's the only time you take another option. But win-win is the best, should be the best, always, always. So he said, and if I focus on my own win and don't consider your point of view, there's no basis for any kind of productive relationship. In the long run, if it isn't a win for both of us, we both lose. That's why win-win is the only real alternative in interdependent realities. So there's a win-win or no deal. He said, if these individuals had come up with a synergistic solution, one that was agreeable to both, they could have gone for an even higher expression of win-win, which is the win-win or no deal. No deal basically means that if we can't find a solution that would benefit us, we agree to disagree agreeably. That is no deal. No expectations have been created, no performance contract established. I don't hire you, or we don't take a particular assignment together because it's obvious that our values or our goals are going in opposite directions. It is so much better to realize this upfront instead of downstream, when expectations have been created and both parties have been disillusioned. When you have no deal as an option in your mind, you feel liberated because you have no need to manipulate people, to push your own agenda, to drive for what you want. That you can be open, you can really try to understand the deeper issues underlying the positions. So win-win or no deal, so that we can maintain our relationships, we can have peace. We talked about that we talked about it before when we said expectation precedes disappointment. So you don't want to have that. Let's clarify what the expectations are. If it's not going to favor both of us, we better not deal at all. So anything less than win-win is in an interdependent reality is a poor second best that will have impact in the long-term relationship. The cost of that impact needs to be carefully considered. If you can't reach a true win-win, you are very often better off to go for a no deal. So a no deal happens when we cannot have a win-win, which will in turn maintain all the relationship because nobody has an expectations like we've earlier stated. But there's something else he said about the no deal. Let's hear it. It said, the win-win or no deal approach is most realistic at the beginning of a business relationship or enterprise. But in a continuing business or relationship, no deal should be eradicated because it is not viable. Imagine that, okay, it would have been easier for us to state our expectations in the beginning or will not deal at all, rather than commencing and then in the middle of it, we now are thinking the option of a no deal. It is depressing for people who have gone through a divorce or people who have had to break up their company. I tell you what, it wasn't a sweet experience for them because they had to do a no deal in the middle of something. It would have been better not to deal from the beginning than having to start and then break whatever you started at somewhere in the middle. You get my point. There are certain characteristics of the people who think win-win. They have integrity, they have maturity, and they have the abundance mentality. So talking about the abundance mentality, it says the character traits essential to win-win is the abundance mentality. The paradigm that there is plenty out there for everybody. Most people are deeply scripted in what I call the scarcity mentality. They see life as having only so much, as though there were only one pie out there. And if someone else were to get the big piece of the pie, it would mean less for everybody. The scarcity mentality is the zero-sum paradigm of life. So we have to have the abundance mentality to be able to term ourselves as win-win people. You get what I'm trying to say? So also for you to be able to call yourself, a win-win thinker, you have to have a high level of consideration and a high level of courage. The courage is for you to be able to state what you want and what will benefit the both of us from the beginning. And the consideration is not to be selfish when you are stating those things. So I'm considering the person I'm in a relationship with, be it business, whatever relationship, in trying to state, what the expectations should be on a particular matter. I'm trying not to be selfish, and then I'm having the courage to be able to say the things that I want he or she to expect from this relationship. And then there's something I wrote here. I said, in win-win situations, both parties are conscious of the relationship they share, and this enables them to have respect for each other's opinion while trying to resolve the issue at hand. That is the consideration I just talked about. I have to be highly considerable, and I have to have the courage to be able to say what I want us to expect at the end of this deal. You understand? Then also, win-win people minded people have a good level of trust for each other. Because they had already stated what they want to achieve, and they know that they have each other's interest at heart. That's already a deposit, because I trust you because I know that you don't want to cheat me, you don't want to run me down, you don't want to do me evil. You get, and you trust me because I have the same thoughts in my heart about you. You get, so win-win people have a high level of trust for themselves because they had already worked on all those expectations before the relationship commenced. Said, when you are dealing with a person who is coming from a paradigm of win-lose, that's the authoritarian people who would do anything to win, the relationship is still the key. The place to focus on is your circle of influence. You make deposits into their emotional bank account through genuine courtesy, respect, and appreciation of that person and for their own point of view. You stay longer in the communication process, you listen more, you listen in greater depth, you express yourself with greater courage, You aren't reactive. You go deeper inside yourself for the strength of character to be proactive. You keep hammering it out until the other person begins to realize that you genuinely want to resolve. You genuinely want the resolution to be a real win for both of you. The very process is a tremendous deposit in the emotional bank account. So it means that I can change someone's mind who is coming with a paradigm that is not win-win by the way I handle a particular issue. And that is me having influence over that person because of the kind of mentality I already possess. So in win-win relationships, there are agreements written to guide both parties, called the performance agreement or partnership agreements. Employees write these agreements, companies and suppliers write these agreements, parents and children write these agreements as well. Everybody can enter into this kind of agreements to ensure, this is just to ensure that the relationship between both parties runs smoothly. So these win-win partnership agreements have certain elements. Let's hear them. Desired results. Identify what is to be done and when. Guidelines. Specify the parameters, the principles and the policies, etc., within which results are to be accomplished. Resources. Identify the human, financial, technical, or organizational support available to help accomplish the results. Accountability. Set up the standards of performance and the time of evaluation. Consequences. Specify good and bad, natural and logical, what does and will happen as a result of the evaluation. So these things are the components that make up a win-win, partnership agreement. And your agreement cannot be void of them, else you'll be having a problem. So win-win agreements are tremendously liberating, but as a product of isolated techniques, they won't hold up. Even if you set them up in the beginning, there's no way to maintain them without personal integrity and a relationship of trust. A true win-win agreement is the product of the paradigm, the character, and the relationship out of which it grows. In the context, it defines and directs the interdependent interaction for which it is created. So this is just trying to say that even if we write this agreement in the beginning and we don't have the integrity and the trust to follow through, things are still going to fall apart. So we need to go back to, our private victory to, call forth our integrity, call forth everything that we have learned, call forth how to put first things first, to be able to hold up our own ends of the agreements that we enter in interdependent relationships. I scripted something here. I said, for me, I think that these fallouts happen when the parties involved they don't have enough integrity. Self-supervision follows the agreement. So if I cannot supervise myself to, do what is expected of me after I've spent hours, to go through an agreement and sign and, and append my signature, saying I agree to what the contract says. If I don't have the integrity to supervise myself, it is still going to fall apart, despite the fact that we have an agreement guiding this relationship. And then I also like to add that the author would say, oftentimes the problem is not the system. This is me taking us back to the Bermuda Trip Award for the company he started with, the story he told us in the beginning. Said, so oftentimes the problem is not the problem is in the system, not in the people. If you put good people in bad systems, you get bad results. You have to water the flowers you want to grow. So good people in bad systems, bad result. Bad people in good systems, good result. Trust me, because the system will help them to look good. It does that. So he said, as people learn to think win-win, they can set up the systems to create and reinforce it. They can transform unnecessarily competitive situations to cooperative ones, and can powerfully impact their effectiveness by building both productivity and production capability. In business, executives can align their systems to create teams of highly productive people working together to compete against external standards of performance. In education, teachers can set up grading systems based on individual performance in the context of agreed upon criteria, and can encourage students to cooperate in productive ways to help each other learn and achieve. In families, parents can shift the focus from competition with each other to cooperation. In activities such as bowling, for example, they can keep a family score and try to beat a previous one. They can set up home responsibilities with win-win agreements that eliminate. In activities such as bowling, for example, they can keep a family score and try to beat the previous one. They can set up home responsibilities with win-win agreements that eliminate constant nagging and enable the parents to do the things only they can do. So reward systems are really important. They can demoralize, they can, galvanize. It depends on what these systems are. They could either breed unhealthy competition or breed good attitudes and, good spirits in the corporation. So he said win-win is not a personality technique. It is a total paradigm of human interaction. It comes from a character of integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality. It grows out of high trust relationships. It is embodied in agreements that effectively clarify and manage expectations as well as accomplishments. It thrives in supportive systems. So win-win, a lot of things have to be put in place to enable the win-win mentality to thrive amongst people, in a family, in a company, in relationships and all of that. We have to take all those things into consideration. So I know that this was, very educational for us. The next time you try to resolve an issue, the next time you have the opportunity to be on a board to deliberate matters, try to think win-win. In fact, it is one of the application suggestions that the author gave us. He said, think about an upcoming interaction where you'll be attempting to reach an agreement or negotiate a solution. Commit to maintain a balance between courage and consideration. That is the think win-win mentality. If you're considerate and if you have the courage, you can say your mind, and you can also consider, how the other person will feel. So thank you for staying with us today, and I charge us, I beg us, I ask us in the name of everything that we hold dear. Please try to practice these things that we're learning. I promise you, our lives are not going to be the same, because people who are highly effective have, put these things to test, and they've seen how much it has helped them. So I beg to say goodbye now, even if it's hard to say. I'll see you next time as I'll be bringing you Habit 5. Stay tuned and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.